Hi, this is Michael Wan, News Director for Radio Korea.
And thank you for joining us on Culture Shock. My name is Young Kim. I'm the Contest Director.
Yes, and we have a very special guest. 오늘 아주 특별한 그런 게스트가 나오셨습니다. 예. 미국 대통령 선거 후보, United States Presidential Candidate Larry Elder. Hi, Larry.
Also, political commentator.
I don't know what you said before that. How do I know I like it?
Oh, you're
not going to like it. You don't want to know what he said.
I don't want to know.
It's kind of secret. That's why we purposely talked in Korean.
It's a Korean thing.
Okay,
No, I'm just kidding.
Not a problem.
How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great.
But you're also Fox News contributor. You're a radio show host.
No. I'm a Fox News guest. When they asked me to come on, I've never made one dime for Fox News. I'm not a contributor.
You're not paid.
I don't work for Fox News.
A contributor would actually make money from it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Whenever it says Fox News contributor, they're being paid.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I see.
If they say Larry Elder, that means Larry Elder was invited. He showed up.
But you've been in media for a long time, and you've also been commentating the politics and analyzing what's going on. I mean, you've been in this game for a long time.
I've been in media for about 40 years, either TV or radio or both.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, I have a syndicated column, which I've had since April of 1998. That's about 1,200 columns. Radio, about 30 years. Half my career was a 4-hour show, then later on a 3-hour show. So there's about 30,000 hours of Larry Elder on radio. I've had 2 nationally syndicated TV shows. One was called Moral Court. It was a court show like Judge Judy. Great show. They shouldn't have canceled it. And the other one was called The Larry Elder Show, kind of like an Oprah Winfrey type show.
That was on CBS, right?
Wow.
It was nationally syndicated. It was on different markets, different channels in different cities. But it was on 135 cities, both shows. And I'm also a New York Times bestselling author. And I have another book coming out in September of this year called As Goes California, about my California gubernatorial race and about my plans for running for president.
And also, you are mentor to many of the political commentators out there. Candace Owens, I didn't know, but
I told him.
Yeah, he was telling me about that. I'm actually a huge fan of Candace Owens.
You know, all the people that they were all mentored. By Larry Elder because he was a pioneer.
I don't want to sound arrogant, but Candace Owens calls me her mentor, and she wrote the foreword for my book that's coming out in September. Ben Shapiro publicly said that I inspired him to get into this field. Andrew Breitbart said the same thing publicly. There's a guy named Alex Marlowe. He's editor-in-chief of Breitbart. I gave him his first job in the conservative world. Michelle Malkin, she first came on my radio show, first time she'd ever been on radio or TV. I put her on. Stephen Miller, one of Donald Trump's top aides. I first put him on my radio show when he was a teenager. He was protesting some incident at his high school. And I thought he was so smart, so bright, so articulate, so knowledgeable to be so young. I had him on over the years about 70 times. I know that because he counted them. And he graduated from Santa Monica High. Then he went to Duke for undergraduate. And that was when the Duke lacrosse scandal took place. And so had him on my show talking about that. Then after he graduated, he began working for Senator Jeff Sessions. Sessions loaned him to Donald Trump and never got him back. And now he's one of the top aides to Donald Trump. So my fingerprints are on a lot of conservatives. There's also a nationally syndicated cartoonist named Tonio Branco. And through my syndicator, which is called Creators, I went to them one time and I said, this guy's really a very good cartoonist. Do you guys syndicate cartoonists? And they said, yes. And I said, you know this guy, Tony Branco? They goes, yeah, he's not that good. I said, no, he's very good. He's not that good. No, he's very good. And so they weren't interested, but Young, I would send a particularly good cartoon that Branco did to Creators over the maybe course of a year after I first mentioned him. And ultimately, they gave him a deal. So now he's a nationally syndicated cartoonist, and I helped to make that happen.
Yeah, we always saw you as a commentator, radio host. I first listened to you, and I thought you were a white person.
I think
the first 5 years, I didn't even know that you were black.
Michael more is a sex symbol than I do radio commentator. But,
okay.
But I'll take that.
But why did you finally decide to get in the ring? You even last year, was it last year, 2 years ago? When you ran. Yeah,
you even suggested that I run for president before.
I did.
And I thought you were crazy. Look, I never thought I'd run for anything, guys. I last ran for 3rd grade class president. And before you asked, yes, I won that race. So I'm batting 500.
So you have history.
and I never thought I'd run for anything. I mean, I've been approached to run for lots of things over the years, and I always said no. Although I did come close to running against Barbara Boxer several years ago when she ran against Carly Fiorina. I got approached, and I said, look, okay, if the GOP backs me, before the primary, I will do it. So I got on a plane, my own dime, and I flew to D.C. and I interviewed with Senator Cornyn from Texas and a bunch of other people who are involved in recruiting candidates to run for Senate. And they said, tell me about your background. And I said, well, I'm from South Central. My father never knew his biological father. Left home at the age of 13, Jim Crow South, 1915 when he was born. So he left right at the beginning of the Great Depression. You hear people say, so-and-so was dirt poor without a dime in his pocket. My dad was dirt poor without a penny in his pocket when he left home. His mother threw him out of the house at the age of 13 because he was quarreling with his mom's then boyfriend. My dad just walked down the road, Athens, Georgia, picked up trash, did anything he could. Ultimately, he became a Pullman porter on the trains and was able to travel all around America and was shocked that you could walk through the front door of a restaurant in Los Angeles and get served. My dad always had some crackers with him and 10 cans of tuna because you never knew in the South you'd be able to get a meal. So my dad made a mental note, maybe someday I'll relocate to California. Pearl Harbor, my dad joined the Marines. He was in charge of cooking for the colored soldiers. That's what they were called then because the military was segregated.
Yeah.
And my dad got out and went back to Chattanooga, Tennessee. This is what I'm telling the Congress people, to get him a job as a cook. And he was told, pardon the language, we don't hire niggers. Mm-hmm. And my dad went to an unemployment office. The lady said, you went to the wrong door. My dad goes out to the hall and sees colored only, goes to that door to the very same lady who sent him out. My dad came home. My mother said, this is crap. I'm going to go to L.A., get me a job as a cook, and I'll send for you. So my dad comes out to L.A., and he walks around for a day and a half, and he's told, you don't have any references. And my dad said, I need references to make ham and eggs. So they treated him the same way in L.A. as they did in Chattanooga, except they were a little more polite about it. My dad goes to the unemployment office. This time only one door, and the lady says, I don't have anything. My dad says, what time do you open? She says 9. What time do you close? She says 5. My dad said, I'll be sitting in that chair until you find something for me. So my dad sat there for a whole day, came back the next day. She calls him up, and she says, I have something. I don't know if you're going to want it. My dad said, of course I'm going to want it. What is it? She says, the job cleaning toilets at Nabisco brand bread. My dad did that for 10 years. Took a second full-time job cleaning toilets at another bread company for 10 years, cooked for a family on the weekend, make additional money because he wanted my mom to be a stay-at-home mom. And he went to night school to get his GED, and then later on went to trade school to learn how to operate a restaurant.
He did everything.
Started a little restaurant when he was 47 years old, which is really old to start a business, and my dad ran it until his 80s. My dad retired. He owned the little building where the business was. He owned a little property next door, plus the house we still have in our family. So altogether, my dad had a net worth a little bit under $1 million when he retired. So I told them all this, and they were, "Oh my God, what a fascinating story! Oh my God, you're so authentic. You came from a tough background, and you believe in America." I told them my dad was a lifelong Republican. My dad always said, Democrats want to give you something for nothing. When you try to get something for nothing, you almost always end up getting nothing for something. And they just love that. And I told them all this stuff, and they said, what a fascinating story. I just knew they were going to support me. I get back to LAX. They call, and they said, we're going to go with Carly Fiorina. And I said, why? And they said 3 reasons. 1, she's a woman. I said, I'll give you that. I'm not going to have a sex change operation to run for Senate. They said 2, she has more money than you. I said, that's true too, because she just retired from Hewlett Packard. They gave her a big HP. They gave her a big settlement. And the 3rd reason they gave is that she has higher name recognition than you do. I said, no, she doesn't. Maybe in D.C., you guys don't know California, but in California, I'm far better known than she is. Anyway, so I decided not to run because I didn't want to run in the primary against the candidate who had been anointed by the GOP. But that was the only other time I came close to running for office.
You were a libertarian. You didn't. You were not a Republican.
I
back
still
then,
am a
right?
libertarian. Small L. Don't take that away from me.
All right. Okay. I won't. I'm not.
Sometimes people say, you used to be a lawyer, don't you? Well, I haven't been disbarred. I'm still a lawyer. No, I've always been a small L libertarian. I've never been a member of the party. But I was a independent, declined to stay. Okay. And then I joined the GOP in order to run as a Republican because I thought I was going to run in the Senate. This is years ago. And I remained a registered Republican. So I'm a small L libertarian and a registered Republican. I call myself a Republitarian. I'm the same thing that Milton Friedman was when he was alive.
And the reason why you're running is you think Biden-Harris administration is doing such a horrendous job, right?
Well, I'm running for that reason, but the primary reason I'm running, Michael, is that I feel I have an obligation to my country. This may sound really self-serving, but my older brother was in the Navy. He was a Vietnam-era vet. My little brother was in the Army. He went to Vietnam. My father, as I mentioned, was a Marine. He served in World War II. I didn't serve, and I don't feel good about that. It's something that's, to me, is missing on my resume. And I feel I have a moral, a patriotic, and religious obligation to give back to my country. I would rather not do this. I would rather not spend my winters in Iowa and New Hampshire. It's hard work. It's grueling. Your private life is dissected, inspected, rejected, lied about. It's not a lot of fun. You have to raise money, and I'm not flush like Donald Trump. So this is a big sacrifice for me. I had a very lucrative job, and the moment I announced, that's over. And so this is costing me a lot, but it's a sacrifice that I feel I have an obligation to give back to my country. I know I have something to contribute, and I know I have something to say.
Not just out of contribution. I almost feel like that maybe frustration was kind of a driving factor.
I think that I wouldn't quite put it that way, but that's not a bad way of putting it. Here's what I think. Obviously, the borders are crazy. We have probably like 8 million people coming in here after the expiration of Title 42. Mm-hmm. The inflation, the way we've been printing money, spending money, going from being energy independent to energy dependent. Our schools in the inner city are just awful.
Education,
and the Democrats don't want school choice because they're in bed with the teachers union. Do you know that 85% of Black 8th graders, these are kids who are 13 years old, nationwide are neither math nor reading proficient? In California, 75% of Black boys cannot read at grade level. 75%. And you want to talk about racial disparity and wealth gap? What do you think causes it? So we, meaning our side, does not talk enough about the lie that America is systemically racist. We don't refute it well enough. And secondly, the 10,000-pound elephant in the room, Young, is the lack of fathers in the home. 70% of Black kids enter the world without a father in the home married to the mother. 25% of white kids do. And again, that translates into this wealth gap that Gavin Newsom says he's trying to fight with reparations. And I don't think our side talks enough about those two issues. It is a lie that America is systemically racist. It is a national scandal that 40% of all kids in America now come into the world without a father in the home married to the mother. Half in the Hispanic community, as I mentioned, 25% in the white community, 70% in the Black community, and that translates into crime, dropouts, not being capable of competing in a digital age. All that stems from not having a father in the home, and we don't talk enough about that. I've made the argument for decades that what we've done with the welfare state is we've incentivized women to marry the government, and we've incentivized men to abandon their financial and moral responsibility, and now we have this problem.
I've noticed on your Twitter and through research that you're very against the reparation program. But when I listen to your story and the racism that your father faced, and even in California when he was turned away, he did his best. He absolutely waited for a job, and he ended up getting that. Right. But when I listen to that story, I'm thinking that people like him would deserve reparations.
From whom? From the people that didn't do anything to him? That's what kills me about this whole thing. Reparations is the extraction of money from people who were never slave owners to be given to people who were never slaves. Given what happened to my father, what do current taxpayers have to do with that? None. And the problem with reparations in California is that California was admitted as a free state. We weren't even a slave state. And the Reparations Board wants there to be an apology. And then they get around the fact that California was not a slave state by saying, well, it's about grievances, redlining, mass incarceration, over-policing. Even if you were to argue that every Black person was a victim of those kinds of things, why does that fall on the back of people right now who had nothing to do with it? It's just completely unfair. And where do you stop with this sort of stuff? In California, Chinese were treated abysmally. There were laws in the Bay Area that prevented Chinese people from competing in the laundry business. There were laws that disallowed Japanese from owning farmland. Yet, look at the household income of the average Japanese American household. and look at the average household income of the Chinese American household, it's higher than the average income of an average white household. How can that be, given all the things that happened to them in the past? And the answer is strong families, hard work, embracing education.
The bill was about $800 billion, right? The reparations.
Yeah, which is
total.
two and a half times the budget of California. And we're running a deficit, $20 billion deficit, and we have a $1.5 trillion unfunded pension liability. Where's the money going to come from?
So Gavin Newsom came out today, and it seems like he's going to kill the bill. So I think that...
Well, he's the one who signed it. He's the one who signed the bill. He's the one who set up the reparations task force. And now they come up with this stupid $1.2 billion, $2 million for every black resident. He's like, oh my God, I've created a monster. My mother used to have an expression, I'll clean it up for you. Gavin Newsom pooped and stepped back in it. So he created this saying in order to get votes. By the way, this thing happened during the period when they were gathering signatures for the recall. All of a sudden, he signs his bill for reparations. It's called buying votes.
Yeah.
And now that the bill's come down, he sees how silly it is. It's had a huge anti-reaction around the country. He wants to run for president. He knows it makes him look like a loon. So now all of a sudden, what he said was, it's more than I'm rejecting the idea of cash payments because it's more than cash payments. What does that even mean? What do you mean it's more? That's what people want. They want money.
Right. It doesn't make sense.
No, it makes no sense.
So Larry, you know all these data. You know, you're a data, doctor. You know everything about how the racial lines go. But the mainstream media never reports about these.
No.
You don't see it in New York Times, Washington Post, CNN. They will never report about this. So how can you overcome all this? All the Republican candidates, presidential candidates, they always face this huge hurdle where you have 99.9% of the entire media against you. How can you
it's like an uphill battle. It's set up. You're set up on a deficit.
People, because you have to convert independent voters and also some Democrat voters.
It is an uphill battle,
win.
and that's one of the reasons I want so strongly to get on the debate stage. The first debate is in August in Milwaukee. You have to raise a certain amount of money, around $2 million from a certain number of donors. But once you're on the debate stage, the media can't cut you off. I mean, you have a certain period of time to make your point. But after that, Americans are going to be watching you. And it's not like giving an interview as I did with CNN during the campaign when I spoke with their reporter, whose name is Joe Johns, for a half hour. They used 2 minutes of the interview, which is not uncommon, and then proceeded to say, well, that's not true, and then to slice it up. If I'm on the debate stage for that time, Americans, independents, Democrats, and Republicans are going to have to hear me without somebody interrupting me, without them taking my words out of context. That's why I want to.
So they're not going to be able to edit the part that they want for their narrative and then use it for that.
And in that connection, I want your viewers and listeners to know that if you go to elderforpresident.com, throw something in the tip jar, help me raise enough money so I can at least get on that debate stage and say some of the things to America that I'm saying to you right now.
Okay, so a lot of people ask me to ask you, do you believe that there is a deep state right now going on in the United States government?
Absolutely.
So how are you going to root it out?
And by deep state, I mean, you'd be surprised how many government employees, how few government employees are political appointees. Most of them are career civil servants.
Yes.
And you cannot get rid of them.
Yeah, they stay there longer than presidents.
Yeah, Jack Kennedy signed an executive order that allowed for collective bargaining unions in the public sector. You know who opposed it? FDR. He thought it was not fair for people who are being paid by taxpayers to go on strike and put a gun to taxpayers' head and say, pay me more money. I think that we ought to reconsider that executive order that JFK sent out that made it almost impossible to fire a civil servant.
I think like Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, and you hear these names all the time, Andy McCabe and James Comey. I think they are.
I mean, just now we've learned that there was a person in the CIA who got a whole bunch of people to sign that letter that claimed the Hunter Biden laptop story was not true. And this is somebody in the Trump administration, under Trump, going around doing this. Knowing full well that the FBI had the laptop as early as 2019. They know it was not true. They know it was authentic. And here the letter is saying that this thing has all the hallmarks of Russian disinformation when they knew otherwise. And you had an actively employed CIA personnel running around trying to get people to sign this thing. And you can't fire this guy? Are you kidding me?
And this was right during the presidential election.
No, I mean,
and talk about election interference, Young. There's a study that found around 16% of Biden voters say had they known about the laptop story, they would not have voted for Biden. That clearly would have switched the election in favor of Donald Trump. Then you had that money that Zuckerberg spent, $419.5 million, getting out Democrat turnout. Clearly, that influenced the election. You had the lie that Donald Trump was in bed with the Russian collusion thing for 2.5 years. And those are just some of the things that this man had to endure. And he still almost won that election.
Yeah, and White House banned that New York Post reporter to even raise those questions. It's an outrage. So I was wondering, how come Republicans do the same thing? Like make a boycott NYT, WAPO, CNN, and just don't do interviews with them and just deal with like Breitbart or Epoch Times or Fox News, just the conservative side. I think they don't do the same way.
Well, the problem is the country is 50-50. And if you boycott liberal news, you're not going to be able to get rational Democrats and independents to vote for you. That's why I'm doing CNN. I'm doing the CNN show this Sunday. It's the Jim Acosta show. And I'm doing it because it's live. I wouldn't have done it if it's a tape because they'll be able to hack it up and do what they want. But it'll be live. And Jim Acosta is the one that was the antagonist to Donald Trump during the Donald Trump administration. And they contacted me and they asked me to come on, and I said, fine.
Okay. I think we'll
see what happens.
Okay. I think the biggest issue right now is the southern border. I think open border is Biden administration's policy. I think they want them to come.
Of course,
because they're going to be Democrats,
and their
Title families
42
are going to be Democrats.
If these illegal aliens turn citizens, turn voters would vote Republican, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
No, it's not.
No.
But Biden is suddenly sending troops there and to pretend that he's
only
going to do
because
something,
now
right?
it's become an issue. For months I watch a lot of CNN, MSNBC, and Fox. And sometimes I just switch over to see what they're all talking about. And Fox has had a guy named Bill Malugin, a reporter on the border, and he's been filing report after report after report for the last 2.5 years about the borders. And I switch over to MSNBC or to CNN, nothing. But now it's become an issue because Title 42 is about ready to expire, and the numbers of people coming up here are going to explode. So now even the other mainstream media are covering it.
Yeah.
Just a couple of days ago, an article in Time magazine, and the headline was something like this: Title 42 is about to expire, and there may be a crisis on the border. May be a crisis. Are you nuts?
It's already a crisis.
5.5 million people already.
Yeah, already here.
May,
6 million
and
plus.
so the mainstream people are now being dragged, kicking and screaming into covering this issue, and so now it's become a political issue. And so Biden sent 1,500 National Guard, and all they're going to do is process more people through faster. So they're not going to put them on the border to stop the illegal aliens. They're going to put them in administrative positions to process their applications for asylum. So all they're going to do is put through more people.
So how would you enforce it? Put a wall? How are you going to enforce it if you're becoming United States
finish
president?
the wall that Donald Trump started. I would reinstate the Remain in Mexico plan for you to apply to the first safe country for asylum. I would stop catch and release. And I would keep Title 42 in place, which says you can expel somebody right away because of the coronavirus pandemic. Mm-hmm. So those things were effective. We had the most secure border, I think, in our nation's history. And right now we have the most insecure border in our nation's history.
Do you believe like even the fentanyl crisis, that is also by design? When you have an open border like this, you have fentanyl flowing over here.
I don't think the Democrats are that cruel or that mean-spirited to create the fentanyl crisis. I just don't think they realize what's going to happen. Okay. And now that's the number one killer of young people, fentanyl.
Okay.
And so it's a disaster all the way around. It's putting strain on healthcare, on education, on housing. It's just been a wall-to-wall disaster that American people were pretty much oblivious to until recently. How oblivious? I saw a poll, this is a few months ago. Recent year, 2.5 million illegal aliens came in the country. Mm-hmm. And Americans were asked, how many illegal aliens came in the country last year? The majority of them said 250,000, meaning they were off by a factor of 10.
Mm-hmm. Because the media don't report about it.
Exactly. So when you're unaware of what's going on, how are you going to be upset about it?
When he mentioned fentanyl, and then fentanyl seems to be like the big thing and also cocktail drugs as well, among the homeless community, among the, I would say the low income earners as well. People that are in trouble. I mean, this is a kind of a problem that's been exploding out. No one seems to be really talking about it, just trying to produce more Narcan or something, or put it in schools and stuff. I mean, are we losing this battle against drugs and against homelessness?
It seems to me we are. those are two different problems. Regarding homelessness, look, we should enforce the law. Either if there's a bed for you, you go to that bed, or you go to jail, or you go to rehab. But you're not going to be on the streets. That's what I would do if I were the mayor of LA.
Well, the thing is that even if you put people in jail in LA, they're released right away anyways, and they're just back on the streets again.
That's true. Well, that's called soft on crime, cast its bail, and again, this is a real problem. It's one of the reasons I ran for governor. George Gascon is the LA County DA. Yeah. There have been 2 unsuccessful recall attempts against him, but there was a successful recall of Chesa Boudin in the Bay Area, and over 60% of voters recalled him, and he was releasing people on the streets who were committing crime. So at some point, the voters are going to have to hit rock bottom like drug addicts and begin to rethink how they've been pulling that lever for the Democratic Party.
I feel like they're just going to keep on voting Democrats until they get buried. I think they just don't.
No, they will not that way.
I gave up on that. I think you're much more of an optimist. Whenever I talk with you, you're a little bit more of an optimist.
He's become very pessimistic these days.
You're depressing me, Michael. Michael, I believe that the captain of the Titanic would have taken evasive action had he known that the iceberg was there. Mm-hmm. We just have to tell people the iceberg is there, and then they'll take evasive action.
Yeah, but a lot of the mainstream media reports otherwise.
That's true.
There is no iceberg.
There is no iceberg. What iceberg?
Yeah, even though you become the United States president, for instance, a Republican goes in the White House, I'm worried about California because still we're stuck with Democrat governors, and with Proposition 47, Proposition 56, how crazy you have lunatic policies like this intact. I mean, it's stark. That's why I feel
that's why people are leaving. 500,000 people
I've thought about it several times, leaving
Who
Cali.
hasn't? Raise your hand if you've thought about leaving California. Come on.
Yes.
500,000 people have left in the last 2.5, 3 years. And just recently, Scott Baio, the actor, is now leaving. He's going to Florida. And he's a friend of mine.
Joe Rogan left too.
Joe Rogan left. Elon
Ben
Musk.
Shapiro left.
Ben Shapiro left. Dave Rubin left.
Yep. Dave Rubin left. Yep.
Maybe it's time for us to leave.
Yeah.
But
Californian, turn out the light, please.
But we don't want to chicken out. We want to fight till the end.
That's what I've told people.
I was on
the Varney and Company show this morning on Fox Business, and he asked me the same thing. And I said, I'm not going to be pushed out of here. I'm going to hopefully I can explain to the Californian people that they ought to stop voting the way they're voting, and connect the dots. There's a reason why housing is so expensive. There's a reason why we have a homeless problem. There's a reason why the schools are so bad. There's a reason why the cost of living is so high. And these are policies that are man-made and can be man-unmade. Mm-hmm.
And California has more registered Republicans than any other states, right? Isn't that number true, or am I off?
Well,
that's how I understand.
By percentage,
percentage-wise,
we're outnumbered 3-1.
Yeah, but number-wise,
so it sort of doesn't matter. Number-wise, we're outnumbered 3-1. There hasn't been a Republican who's won statewide in California in over 20 years. I thought maybe Lanny Chin might break that string because he got endorsed by the LA Times and got endorsed by the Sacramento
Bee. That was the most depressing election.
And he ran for controller.
Yep. California
and he's
controller.
A Republican, conservative. He's a fellow at the Hoover Institute, Ivy League educated. He made some comments to the effect of 2020 wasn't stolen, and he made some comments about not sure if he's going to endorse Trump in 2024. So that's the kind of Republican that the LA Times likes, and they endorsed him. And he still lost by 9 points?
Because you have an R.
Wasn't even close, yeah.
Because you have an R. Because even though, Larry, you might win, you're not going to win California, Larry. I can predict that.
Okay, yeah, I can too.
Well, I was hoping you would. I really thought it was going to happen. People have to be sick of this.
You almost had it. You almost had it, though.
Young, you know what they did? They meaning the Democrats, when this thing got into the margin of error, there were two parts of the ballot. First part is, do you want Gavin Newsom recalled?
Yeah.
And at one point, it was about 50-50.
Yep.
They were scared bleepless.
And they started giving us
in comes Obama, cut a commercial. In comes
Kamala.
Elizabeth Warren, she cut a commercial. Bernie Sanders cut a commercial. Biden flew out. And they all said the same thing. Stop the Republican takeover.
Yeah.
Larry Elder is the closest thing to a Trump clone I've ever seen. Even though Trump did not endorse me, I did not want his endorsement, didn't ask for it. I wanted this to be a California race. None of these people who cut commercials for him said, Gavin Newsom is doing a great job regarding the way he shut down the state because of COVID. Gavin Newsom is doing a great job on crime. Gavin Newsom is doing a great job on the cost of living. Gavin Newsom is doing a great job stopping people from leaving California. They said none of that. They just said, stop the Republican takeover. And in California, it worked. That line did not work in Virginia. They tried it against Glenn Youngkin, and it didn't work because the state is far more evenly balanced and the media are more fair. And Youngkin and his opponent, McAuliffe, had to debate. Gavin Newsom refused to debate me.
You know, how much of a I think responsibility do you think media? You've been in media. You're in media now. Yeah. I mean, I think media is
not anymore.
Well, I believe media is one of the biggest reasons right now that people aren't getting the right information.
No question about it.
And people are getting duped, having little laws, propositions snuck in between, covered up by something else, noise making, noise marketing. I mean, how much do you think responsibility? How much responsibility does media have?
Huge. Take two of the most important newspapers, the New York Times and Washington Post. The New York Times has not endorsed a Republican for president since 1956. I was 4 years old. I'm 71 now. The Washington Post has never endorsed a Republican for president. Never. You saw what happened with the Twitter files. The suppression of conservative content, the suppression of any kind of dissent about
not conservative content, truth content.
Fair enough. And the whole argument about whether or not there should be lockdowns and mandates and mask mandates and vaccine mandates, all of that discussion was suppressed. We found that because Elon Musk, thank goodness, bought Twitter and exposed all of this. Mm-hmm. Think about what would have happened had Elon Musk not bought Twitter. Think about what would have happened had the laptop store owner not made a copy of the laptop and ultimately got into the hands of Giuliani. Yeah. We would never have even known it existed.
So I'm forever grateful for Elon Musk buying Twitter because we haven't been able to find all this COVID-related stuff.
And remember Joe Rogan and the medicine that he took when he had COVID?
Ivermectin. They call it a horse.
Horse drug, right? Joe Rogan is taking a horse drug.
Yeah, CNN saying all that kind of thing.
And when I mentioned that I got interviewed by CNN, they asked me about my attitude about the vaccine, and I called anti-vax. I've been vaccinated.
Yeah, you are vaccinated.
I'm over 65 years old. I have a comorbidity. I have high blood pressure. I have a rare blood condition as well. So my doctor strongly urged me to get vaccinated. So I did. So how am I anti-vax? And then he said, do you think people should be vaccinated? I said, well, young, healthy people ought not be vaccinated. They're not likely to get sick. They're not likely to get real sick. They're not likely to be hospitalized. And they're certainly not likely to die. And they played that part of it. And then Joe John said, but that's not true. According to the CDC, yada, blah, et cetera. Turned out it is true. The people that are affected by COVID were old people who had comorbidities. Young people were not affected or not affected any more than, say, the garden variety flu. And yet many states shut down their economies. People lost a whole year of in-person education, reading and math, which is going to translate into earnings loss over the course of their lifetime. It was just abysmal the way we responded to this pandemic.
I think we're running against a break time right now. So we'll be back with United States presidential candidate Larry Elder after these words.
직장 성희롱, 지구를 위협합니다.
열심히 회사 업무를 하고 있는 꽃미남 회사원 A씨. A씨의 하루를 한번 따라가 볼까요? 꽃미남 A씨를 음흉하게 쳐다보는 팀원들. 매일매일이 미남은 괴로워입니다. 일과 중 궁금한 게 생겨 질문을 했는데 선배가 불필요한 신체 접촉을 일삼네요. 이거 영 불편해요. 물을 들어가는 A씨. 동료 직원이 훑어보며 하트를 날리네요. 참 민망하면서 무서워요. 업무 후 칭찬을 받는데 팀장님이 엉덩이를 토닥토닥 하면 안 되는 거 아닌가요? 하루가 영 불편한 꽃미남의 하루. 무엇이 잘못된 거죠?
여러분, 이것은 정말 잘못된 상황입니다. 직장 내에서 성희롱을 당하고 계신다고 느끼시면 제일 먼저 슈퍼바이저 혹은 HR 부서의 도움을 꼭 청하셔야 합니다. 만약 회사 내에서 충분한 도움을 받지 못하신 경우 캘리포니아주에서는 Department of Fair Employment and Housing이라는 곳에서 추가적으로 도움을 받으실 수 있습니다. 자세한 내용은 해당 웹사이트에서 확인해 주시기 바랍니다.
회사 내 이루어지는 성희롱의 범위는 생각보다 넓습니다. 당사자가 원하지 않는 신체 접촉은 하지 않으셔야 합니다. 상대방을 서로 배려하는 직장 문화를 만듭시다. 이 광고는 라디오코리아와 함께합니다.
And welcome back to Culture Shock. We are with presidential candidate, Mr. Larry Elder, also longtime show host and political, I would say, analyst.
Documentarian too, filmmaker.
That's right.
You have an Uncle Tom 1 and 2.
Sex symbol.
Sex symbol too, you know.
And also mentor to
I
some
know,
of the
yeah,
greatest
yeah. I mean,
debaters of all time.
Yeah.
Like, you
Yeah,
know
there's
what I
some
mean?
girls who who loves Larry, you know. So.
The appropriate term is women.
Women. Oh, okay. You're right.
Oh,
Since there's so
girls, yeah, you
since
can't
there's
say
so many
girls.
Can't
pedophiles
say
and
girl
all those
anymore.
kind of Epstein
they'll
stuff
they'll
going
take you
on.
down to HR and file a lawsuit against you.
By the way, since you went there, what do you think about the Epstein Island news that hit, recently with CIA current director?
Yeah, there's a lot of
William
names on
Burns
there.
have been there to the Epstein Island and all
Oh.
these famous figures, going there.
Well,
So do you believe that
I assure you,
there are
my name is not on the log anywhere.
Yeah.
I haven't really paid that much attention to it. I'm suspicious about the way Jeffrey Epstein died, like a lot of people are.
Yep.
But I haven't paid that much attention to it.
Okay, so this is an issue that I think about every day, and I talk with my wife every day about this, about the World Economic Forum, Open Society Foundation, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So increasing number of Americans are becoming aware of these anti-human agenda organizations, which I view in many views. But there has been some people saying that China is against this. China is against this, and George Soros has declared that China and Xi Jinping is their number one enemy. And if you look at the homepage of World Economic Forum, they are openly pushing degrowth and depopulation. I checked it, while China is pursuing growth and construction. So the rise of China is happening. They're brokering a deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and
Right.
they're being very active about even trying to brokering a peace deal between Ukraine and Russia. So they're on the rise, while Biden administration is tanking America. So what's your thought on this?
That's a big question, Michael. I think that China is our biggest adversary. I think that they have designs on world domination. But I also think that we have to be careful when we talk about what kind of response we're going to have if and when China invades Taiwan. When I say we have to be careful for a number of reasons, I always like to look at things from my enemy's perspective. China views Taiwan the way we view New Jersey. They feel that Taiwan is part of China, and they've had longstanding policy to reunite China with Taiwan. The only thing that stopped them was us. China's military its standing army is twice as large as ours. They are becoming increasingly stronger militarily. Their population is 5 times bigger than ours. Half of the cargo trade on ships goes through that strait in Taiwan. We are dependent upon China for pharmaceuticals, for lithium that goes into our cell phones. We're pushing Americans into buying EVs for reasons that I question. And the rare earth materials that go into the batteries, the lithium, the cobalt, the nickel, either mined and processed in China or mined and processed in places around the world controlled by China, like the Congo, where they're using child labor, digging stuff out, cobalt with their hands. And so there's a humanitarian crisis, and we're increasingly jeopardizing our national security by forcing people to buy EVs, making us more dependent upon China. So all these things have to be taken into consideration. But I think it is a absolute disaster to push EVs, making us more and more dependent upon China. We need to bring things back, manufacturing to America. We need to manufacture things on our own soil for national security reasons and for economic reasons.
But I think we can't blame China. It was our own policy that allowed that to happen. For
China
China to come into the world market,
China has been
and they
very,
just took advantage of it.
They've been very clever. They've set up all these China chairs in colleges and universities. They send a bunch of students over. One of the obligations of any student from China is to report back to the government things that the government wants you to spy on and find out about. They've given money to politicians like Joe Biden, like the Biden family. They've infused themselves in our society. They buy farmland near sensitive military installations, and we let it happen.
Hey, let me, since we're talking on the subject of Asia, I mean, how about North Korea? I mean, through your presidency, if you become president, how would you deal with North Korea? I mean,
Well, I think the policy...
Would you meet with Kim Jong Un?
Yeah, that's kind of a question, I think.
Yeah, the policy has to be to contain them. Once a country has nuclear weapons, all of a sudden you have to deal with them differently. I mean, if they didn't have nuclear weapons, they would have a GDP the size of what? A small store in Manhattan. But once you allow somebody like that to have nuclear weapons, which is why it's so perilous to allow Iran to do so, they've got to be dealt with differently. So, I think the policy is to continue to isolate North Korea, and hopefully at some point it'll implode from within, and people will rise up and take over their country. But that's a long-term vision. Outside of that, we're not going to invade them. And so we're in this sort of stalemate. I mean, they got the nukes under Jimmy Carter. Carter sent people there, and they signed a deal. Bill Clinton did, and claims that he stopped North Korea from getting nukes, and they just laughed as soon as they left. And so we were duped, we were lied to, and we were naive.
Can we have better rapport with these, mighty countries like China, Russia, even North Korea? Isn't there a way that we can kind of get along?
Yeah,
sounds naive, but
we need to have. We do have a dialogue. It may not be at the top level, but there are intermediaries between the two countries. But again, once a country obtains nuclear weapons, you have to deal with them differently. And China is becoming increasingly powerful. They're not like us. I mean, on per capita income, they're not even close to us. But they're a repressive regime. They can spend money on however they want to, and they're spending way more money on their military than we're spending right now. And we have to be very careful that we don't talk our way into getting into some sort of shooting war against a nuclear power.
You didn't answer that question. Are you going to meet Kim Jong Un? Would you be willing to, like Trump?
I would
and
be.
negotiate?
Yes.
You would. Mm-hmm. You would. Okay. All right. Why do you think Korean Asian communities should rally around you?
Because merit is under attack right now.
Okay.
Lowell High School is the finest public high school in California. I think about 60% of its student body is Asian American, and because of diversity, equity, and inclusion, that's been under attack. Asian American families have had to file a lawsuit to reinstate the admissions test that Lowell used to have. Thomas Jefferson High School in Fairfax, Virginia, is probably the finest public high school east of the Mississippi, and it too is under attack. 60% of the student body is Asian American, and as a result, a lot of parents claim that it's not sufficiently representative, and there was a move to get rid of the test. That move, I think, was beaten back. But Asians are being punished for simply committing the crime of working really, really hard, and it's not fair. Race-based preferences are not fair. It's clear that after Proposition 209 got passed here in California, I think it was 1996.
Is that affirmative action?
Yeah,
Okay.
that denied the ability of colleges and universities and contractors and government employees to use race as a factor. And as soon as that passed, all of a sudden the percentage of Asian Americans that got into the most competitive campuses, UCLA and UC Berkeley, went up, and the percentage of black and brown into those campuses went down. Mm-hmm. But overall, the same percentage of of black and Hispanic kids got into the UC system. They just went to the lesser competitive campuses. And as a result, they graduated on time. When you lower standards and you admit people in who can't compete, they're more likely to drop out, incur student debt, and be angry at the world. And so all of this race-based stuff has simply caused a bunch of kids to be mismatched. They're in the wrong university. They would have been fine at a less competitive university where the pace wasn't so fast. And so you're hurting the very people that you claim that you care about.
And they claim that Asian students, they don't have colorful characters, and they lack it.
Yeah, other stereotypes. That they're too narrow, they're too nerdy, they're too this, they're too that. It's just so offensive. It's racist.
Mm-hmm. I want your honest assessment about Donald Trump.
As opposed to dishonest.
Yeah, as opposed to dishonest.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that Donald Trump.
I want you to be honest for a moment, Larry. Yeah. You've been lying for the last 41 minutes.
Yeah.
Now let's be honest.
Yeah,
I want your honest when everybody says that. Now be honest.
No,
what do you think I was before?
I'm saying this because
it's kind of insulting.
I know that you didn't like.
I'm not going to say racist. I'm just going to say insulting.
I know that you didn't like Trump in the 2016 election cycle.
Negatron.
Trump was
negative.
the last person that you would vote for. You said
Here's
that.
Let me give you my story about Trump, Michael. When he came down the escalator, I'm at home, I'm watching this, and he comes out. And by the way, I never thought he was going to run. Because every 4 years, 8 years,
I thought he was
I'm going to run, and then he doesn't do it.
I thought he was lying.
I thought he was just attracting attention because that's what he does.
Yeah.
I was shocked when he said he's going to run. So I'm at home, comes down the escalator, and he gives his kind of unscripted speech about Mexicans and rapists. And I'm like, oh my goodness. Wait until the media chews this guy up. He will be done. He's going to say, I decided against it. It'll be the shortest campaign in history. That's what I thought.
I disagree with you. I thought he was going to punch through, though. But
Really?
anyway. Yeah.
Well, this is what I thought at home when the escalator day. So the next day, I went to an area of LA called Sunland, which is primarily a white, blue-collar area of LA. I was there on business, and I went to a restaurant called Coco's, which is like a Denny's. And I'm at the counter having my all-American breakfast of bacon, eggs, and hash brown. And a guy comes up to me and says, "Are you Larry Elder? What are you doing? I'm here on business. What do you think about our guy?" And I said, "Our guy?" And he said, "Trump." And I said, "Well, what did you think?" He said, "Speaks for me." And he walked away. I'm eating. A few minutes later, another guy comes up to me. "Are you Larry?" "Yeah." Same conversation. I was there for 45 minutes. I had that same conversation with about 15 different people.
Wow.
Most of them were white. A couple of them were Hispanic. One was Asian American. And they all said the same thing. It's about time somebody spoke for us. It's about time somebody stood up for us. It's about time somebody remembered us. And so I went on the air that day, and I said, I told my audience what I just told you, and I had 1.5 million people listening to me in 300 markets around the country. I told my listeners what I just told you, and I said, I've not seen anybody connect with regular people like this since Ronald Reagan. This guy is going to be nominated, and this guy's going to win. And for the next 3 hours, people said, "You're crazy." And I said, "You didn't see what I saw."
Yeah.
So from that point on, I really thought he had a shot.
So what do you think?
And I campaigned with him in 2016.
You did. You're right. You did.
I went to Cleveland Church, black church in Cleveland with him.
Yeah.
And we had about 20 minutes speaking one-on-one. And I said, there's one thing you should apologize for. He said, "Oh, I know what you're going to say. What I said about John McCain." I said, "No." I said, "You said that George W. Bush lied us into the Iraq War." Now, I know you are arguing that you were opposed to it, although I think that's dubious because on Howard Stern, he said, "Yeah, I am in favor of it." Then later on, he said he wasn't, but whatever. And I said, the intel was wrong, but nobody lied. I've spoken personally with Condoleezza Rice and with Colin Powell, and both of them said the intel was wrong, but nobody lied. I said there were a number of reasons why we went into Iraq. It wasn't just because of the WMD. It was because
the resolution, UN resolution.
Yeah, because Saddam Hussein was shooting at the planes that were patrolling the southern and northern no-fly zones. He was stealing from the Oil for Food program. We know he had chemical weapons because he used them on his own people. He used them on the Kurds. He tried to assassinate President George Herbert Walker Bush.
But isn't in retrospect?
There were a number of reasons. So I'm telling this to Trump, and he goes, "Well, blah, blah, blah." But he's never said it again. And I noticed that Donald Trump doesn't apologize for anything, but he doesn't say the same stupid thing twice. So I'm taking credit for it.
But do you think he did a good job in his first term? And I also wanted to ask you, since you talked about the Iraq War, in retrospect, do you think we shouldn't have gone in the first place? And with Hussein, it was better off because all the American soldiers losing their limbs and lives?
Two questions. I thought Donald Trump did an extraordinary job as president. The economy was rocking and rolling. We had a low inflation. We had low interest rates. The borders were secured. All the judges he put in the Supreme Court and the lower levels. He supported school choice. He did an extraordinarily good job as president. And the reason I'm running, though, is because I support his policies. I'm an American First guy. But there are a lot of voters in America, for reasons that are mostly unfair, who would not vote for him if he walked on water. They'd say he can't swim. And I'm talking about swing voters, 400,000 swing voters in about a dozen states that will determine who wins or who loses. And these are primarily suburban women. And many of them do not like Donald Trump for reasons that I don't think are fair. But it's not up to me to try to figure that out. I mean, maybe someday they'll develop a vaccine for Trump derangement syndrome. But until then, I think we are running a risk by running somebody that a lot of suburban women will not vote for and possibly incur another 4 years of Biden, and frankly, it's going to be worse than that, because what Biden's going to do if he wins is to turn it over to Kamala Harris, and depending upon when he gives her the baton, she could finish out his term and then run 2 more times.
Yeah.
So we could have 10 years of Kamala Harris. Are you kidding me?
Wow.
That's way too much to risk, in my opinion.
I remember, Larry, when you went after Trump too, when he became president, you criticized him putting tariffs on China. Why was that?
I didn't criticize tariffs on China. I criticized tariffs on our allies.
On our allies.
On our allies.
Oh, not China.
Yeah, on our allies.
So you're talking about maybe like South Korea, some of the deals that were redone?
Like you don't believe in tariffs,
like
right?
Canada. I'm a free trader. Milton Friedman says through tariffs, we do to ourselves what our enemy does in wartime. During wartime, we put on tariffs. We put on tariffs in peacetime. We do to our enemies what our enemies do to us during wartime. I just don't believe you should put tariffs on friendly nations, on nations we trade with who are friendly. But tariffs against our enemies and against China for stealing our technology, absolutely.
Oh, okay.
You know, when you get to the debate stage and you're on your run, what are some of the like priority list of issues that you want to debate on?
Can I just say one more thing about tariffs?
Yes.
I think free trade is a two-way street,
Uh-huh.
and many of our allies have restrictions on us. And
Yeah.
what Donald Trump did effectively is to get them to reduce those restrictions.
I think it made sense.
And he stood up to them, and that opened my eyes, because I realized that you don't have to take it. You could say, okay, here's what we're going to do to you if you don't lower your tariffs against us. So I think that taking a tough stance the way he did got some of our friendly countries to lower some of their barriers against our goods and services, and that's a good thing.
And even with the NATO, right, asking for more money,
Oh, yeah.
I think that was a good thing. And,
Remember when he sat around that table and he blasted
I
all
know,
these
it
NATO
was
countries?
crazy. It was a
a
crazy
tour de
thing.
force.
I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah, I haven't
that
either.
was the most shocking.
And they wanted somewhere to hide. And he said, and here you are. You built this pipeline to Russia, Germany, and now you're more dependent upon us on Russia, and you want us to defend you if Russia invades? What is that? And they had no answer. They were embarrassed.
That's true, because some of the countries, some of the other Asian countries perhaps that import American goods, they do put a large tariff on it. And after some of the free trade deals that were incurred, the prices did go down. But back to that question, what are some of the issues that you want to prioritize in your presidential run?
Well, I want to be the kind of president that I think Americans elected Barack Obama to be. And that was to at least heal the nation racially.
And a unifying president.
And he did the opposite. When Obama walked into the Oval Office, he had a 70% approval rating. I mean, think about that.
It was high.
He got elected with 52%, and he walked into the Oval Office the third week of January 2009 with a 70% approval rating. How can that be? It's not that people who voted for him, who didn't vote for him, said, you know what? I want my taxes raised. I want capital gains taxes increased. I want Obamacare. And at the time, the war in Iraq was still popular, and he was opposed to the war. And so people didn't all of a sudden switch their positions on those issues, but they said, you know what? This guy at least will stop the nonsense that America is systemically racist and stop us from being at each other's throats over issues of race. He did the opposite. Mm-hmm. When he walked into the Oval Office, majority of both whites and blacks thought race relations would improve. When he left 8 years later, majority of blacks and whites thought race relations got worse. Mm-hmm. How can that be when they elected the first black president and he got reelected? The answer is he played the race card over and over and over again. Really did. From the Cambridge police acted stupidly, to if I had a son, he looked like Trayvon, to embracing Black Lives Matter, to having Al Sharpton in the White House a bunch of times, to having an AG, Eric Holder, who called voter ID pernicious racism. He made it worse. And when he left, as I said, both blacks and whites thought things were worse. In his last 2 years, there were police shootings. There were 2 officers killed execution style in New York by a black man who posted on social media that he believed the police were engaging in systemic racism. 3 officers were killed execution style in Baton Rouge by a black man who told friends or posted on social media he thought that the police were systemically racist. 5 officers were killed execution style in Dallas by a black man who felt the same way. That kind of rhetoric that Obama pushed for 8 years has infused the whole country. And here's a man who if anybody has a reason to kiss America's ground, it's Barack Obama. He goes to the finest prep school in Hawaii, comes to L.A. for 2 years, goes to the very fine private school called Occidental, finishes up at Columbia, Ivy League, goes to Harvard Law School, Ivy League, becomes the president of the Law Review, comes to Chicago, becomes a Illinois state senator, becomes a U.S. senator, and then before he even knows where the bathroom is, runs for president and gets elected.
I know.
Why in the world would this guy be angry and be playing the race card? The answer is to get blacks believing that America is systemically racist because they want blacks to vote based on social justice and equity, not on crime, not on jobs, not on inflation like everybody else. Because without that 95% near monolithic black vote, the Democratic Party cannot win at the top level, and they know it. And so Obama knows that. And he knows everything I just now told you is true. He knows America's not systemically racist. This is the least racist majority white country in the world, provides more opportunities for blacks than anywhere else in the world, including all countries of Africa. It is a lie, and he knows it's not true.
Probably.
He did it for power.
Yeah, probably George Soros told him to. I'm just kidding.
It's pathetic. It really is.
Yeah. So Larry,
it's quite offensive for somebody like that to be embracing Al Sharpton. He had Al Sharpton to the White House over 80 times.
Yeah,
Al Sharpton, who made his bones by falsely accusing white men of raping a black woman. He was in the thicks of the Crown Heights riots in New York, made a bunch of anti-Semitic comments, and now he has a TV show on MSNBC, and he's considered to be a Democratic kingmaker. Scotty, beam me up. Honestly, really?
It's MSNBC.
Larry, this is an important question that I want to ask you. Larry, do you think the United States was behind the explosion of Nord Stream pipeline? Because, former New York Times investigative reporter who won a Pulitzer Prize, Seymour Hersh, reported a story. I don't know whether you read that. You never heard about this?
I've heard that allegation, but I have no idea one way or the other.
You think Russia did it? I mean, I want to know.
I just don't know.
I think it's an important issue. I'll send you some articles so that you can probably check it out.
It's important enough for me not to comment on it if I don't know the facts, and I don't really have it thought it through, so I just don't know.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So do you think...
Isn't it refreshing that a candidate says I don't know enough about it to comment?
Yeah. Instead of acting like...
No. The impression that I got is because whenever I ask you a question, your answers are so long that I think your purpose... I think probably I'm going to answer next time. No, but you really honestly don't know about it.
I heard the allegation. Okay. I just don't know enough about it.
Got it. Mm-hmm. Do you think the BLM and Antifa movement completely changed the fabric of America? Because I think it really did. Your opinion?
Well, BLM started, people think it started because of George Floyd. It didn't. It started because of the death of Trayvon Martin. Mm-hmm. That's when it started.
Yeah.
And the jury found George Zimmerman, the guy that shot and killed Trayvon Martin, not guilty. There were no blacks on the jury, but there was one black alternate. And the alternate said, had he been on the jury, he would have found him not guilty as well. And those jurors who spoke to the media afterwards said that race never had anything to do with their encounter. So all of us, so the whole premise of Black Lives Matter is false. And then Black Lives Matter got a lot more energy and juice after the death of George Floyd. Now, there were 4 months of protests, sometimes violent, in the streets of America. 35 people or so died. 2,000 people were injured, and at least $2 billion in property damage. Here's the thing. There is zero evidence, however you feel about what Derek Chauvin did, zero evidence that he was motivated because of George Floyd's race. In fact, the lead prosecutor was a black man. Yeah. And in his opening statement, he took pains to argue that the police in general were not on trial, that the Minneapolis PD in general was not on trial. This individual was on trial, and he never argued that what Derek Chauvin did was because of George Floyd's race. In fact, Derek Chauvin was never charged with a hate crime. So you have a bunch of people out in the streets yelling and screaming about social injustice, racial injustice, when the lead prosecutor, who was black, never argued that Derek Chauvin was motivated because of George Floyd's race. Same thing with this thing that just now happened in New York with the subway. Mm-hmm. You have a white Marine who put the homeless man in a chokehold, who was making menacing comments to people on the subway in New York, who had a career criminal record, including assault. And now you have all these protests in New York alleging racial injustice. There is zero evidence that the Marine was motivated because of this man's race. Furthermore, one of the persons holding him down was black, which doesn't seem to matter to anybody. Mm-hmm. So I don't get how you go from something like that to "We shall overcome," when there's no evidence whatsoever that the Marine was motivated by this guy's race. Suppose Jordan Neely, that's his name, were white. You think the Marine wouldn't have done anything? Well, Jordan Neely is not black, so I'm going to sit here and have him menace people on the train. I'll let it go.
All right. Thank you for joining us today on Culture Shock. I hope you enjoyed it.